I recently explained in a video that 5th Gen 4Runners are overpriced and overhyped, and you should instead look at the Lexus GX460. Well, the new Land Cruiser and the new Lexus GX550 are also overpriced and overhyped, and instead you should look at either a Lexus LX570 or a 200 series Land Cruiser. I'll explain everything in today's video. Let's get right into it. Both the LX and the 200 series Land Cruiser are powered by a 5.7 liter V8. If you get the newer versions of either, so 2016 plus, it's got an 8-speed automatic transmission. That's the way to go, in my personal opinion. I'll explain more of that later. Anyways, 381 horsepower, 401 pound-feet of torque, and you can expect to average about 15 miles per gallon with this, and you've got almost 25 gallons of fuel capacity. The 250 Land Cruiser has a hybrid turbo 4-cylinder. The GX has a hybrid turbo V6. Both of those powertrains have less horsepower than this, and they're not nearly as smooth in terms of the overall performance. They do have more torque. On paper, they're supposed to get better fuel economy. In the real world, with my 250 Land Cruiser with real tires, like what I have on my 200 series, I was averaging 15, 16 in the winter, and then sometimes I would see 20 miles per gallon when the temperatures were right. With the Lexus GX550, I've consistently averaged about 17 miles per gallon with that, so you're getting barely better fuel economy, and both those vehicles have a smaller fuel tank. The Lexus has like a 21 gallon, the Land Cruiser has like an 18 gallon roughly sized fuel tank. So yeah, just downsizing on everything with both those. I'm trying to hit 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I'd really appreciate it if you'd help out with that. Now, both the 200 series and the LX have all the front-end equipment that you need. You can see we've got bulky advanced headlights with cool DRLs. Again, if you get the 2016 Plus, we got fog lights. We also even have a front camera. And unlike the GX and the 250 Land Cruiser, this has really good clearance. I haven't bottomed out in this car once, whereas testing both the GX and the 250 Land Cruiser, I have bottomed out several times. I don't know what it is, but just the angles on this car are better. So I think overall, looks-wise, this and the LX570 look just as good as the 250 and the GX, and they perform just as well off-road, even though you can't fit as big of tires. So on the GX and the 250 Land Cruiser, you can do 34s, whereas this can only fit 33-inch tall tires. But again, this has about as much clearance or even more clearance with these 33s versus either of those cars with the 34s. There's also a ton of aftermarket support for both of the vehicles. For example, I've got these rock rails that are aftermarket, and I've got a 40-gallon fuel tank that's also aftermarket that massively increases my range. So if you're like me and you're actually going to use your Land Cruiser for what it's meant to be used for, it's a lot easier to get parts for the 200 series and the LX570 than it is for the new stuff, because there's just not a lot of parts built out for those yet. More stuff will come in the future, but it's a waiting game with that. And something that's very important to remember is with the 200 series Land Cruiser, there has been over a decade worth of development in the aftermarket world put into this vehicle. And so all the parts are just going to be better quality compared to the parts you're going to get with the GX or the 250, because a lot of those parts are just getting basically rushed to get them out onto the market. My 200 is not a 3-row because it's a Heritage Edition, but you can get the 200 with a 3rd row that's very easy to remove. So you can either have a 3rd row or tons of cargo space. The new Land Cruiser doesn't even have a 3rd row as an option, and the GX does have a 3rd row. You can't remove it. And if that wasn't enough, this has a tailgate from the factory, which is very, very useful. Now, although the legroom feels pretty similar to the new Land Cruiser or the GX, this feels like it has more space overall, and it really comes down to the width. Like, I feel like I've got plenty of space here on the side. The 3rd row passenger feels like it's got space, and then the other passenger feels like they also have space. Also, I got heated seats in the back and my own climate zone on either side, so like I said, this has more than enough features when it comes to luxury. And because of how the seats are placed in the 200 series, it just feels like the headroom overall is a little bit better. It's not like a huge deal, but just with the extra width and kind of the headroom feel, this just is a much more spacious feeling vehicle. Blind spot monitoring, keyless entry. Do you really need more tech than this? Heck, this thing even has memory seats, power adjustments with these seats, the mirrors power fold in. It's even got a power adjustable steering wheel. It's not like you have to stick the key in the ignition either. Push button. And look at that, beautiful analog gauge. Not that crappy digital stuff that just doesn't age all that well. Now I'm not done talking about tech. This has adaptive cruise control. Now it doesn't have the lane centering function. It does have lane departure, but like, why do you want the car to steer for you? Like, cars are meant for driving. So like the adaptive cruise control, nice for trips. That's all you need. Yes, the 360 camera system doesn't have as good of resolution as the new stuff, but it's more than good enough. Like, if this doesn't work for you, you got problems. But wait, there's more. We've got dual zone up front. Inside there is a wireless phone charging pad and good old-fashioned USB port. You probably also noticed heated and ventilated seats and heated steering wheel. Again, is there any more luxury that you need? Like, this has everything so far. Now, when it comes off-road tech, 2-speed transfer case, it's got crawl control. It even has trail turn assist that neither the GX nor the new 250 Land Cruiser has. Now, it doesn't have a rear diff lock. It only has a center diff lock. I've taken all the vehicles off-road, and first off, I don't mind the sounds that the old multi-terrain select crawl control system makes, like, perfectly fine with that. And the rear diff lock on the new 250 Land Cruiser and on the GX is completely useless. The multi-terrain select is more than enough. If they had a front diff lock, it'd be a different story because they give you maximum control. But I've had several courses that I've taken those vehicles through, and every single time I've used the rear diff lock and then not used it, I found that the rear diff lock doesn't really provide any extra traction over the MTS system. And so this, with KDSS and the center diff lock and multi-terrain select, is just as capable off-road as the new stuff. The only thing that gives you more capability is the new LX570H Overtrail, because it has a front diff lock. Now, I know I'm gonna get a bunch of yappers about the pricing of these 200 series, but this is not any more expensive than a GX or a 250 Land Cruiser. If you load up a 250 Land Cruiser with all the luxury features and the off-road stuff that the 200 series has, you're looking at well over $70,000 for the MSRP. The Lexus GX is over $80,000 for the MSRP, and so neither of those vehicles are cheap by any means when you compare similar equipment to similar equipment. And you can find nice low mileage examples of 200 series and LX570s for $70,000 to $80,000, no problem. Now, obviously we're comparing a used car to a new car, but resale value on these is obviously very strong, and so that means that you're not going to lose the same amount of money that you'll lose on a 250 especially, and then also on the GX. The GX is really hyped up right now. As soon as the hype dies, I'll promise you those values are absolutely going to tank. They are massively overvalued on the used car market right now. They're selling for over their original MSRP. That is not going to last. Let's take this 200 series out, and I will tell you a couple of downsides with this vehicle, but I think by the end you'll be convinced that you should buy a 200 series instead of a GX or a new 250. Now, by the way, if you hear a little bit of rattling, I cannot get my tripod to not make noise. Sorry about that. I put it in several different positions and it's just being a noisy fella, so sorry about that. But anyways, here are the downsides. So first off, both of them are used vehicles, so you do have to worry about rust. That's one thing. Just general condition, right? You're looking at used, brand new, it's going to be like new condition, hopefully. Used vehicles, you got to worry about this stuff. So there is one part, is it's going to be more time intensive to find the right one. And so that's one thing, and rust really does kill any vehicle. But yeah, these Toyotas, it does kill them. So you gotta be aware of that and make sure you're not getting a vehicle that's all rusted out. So just understand it'll be a process. It'll take some time to find the right one. But you could also see it as is, you know, with like a GX, you pretty much have to wait for one to show up at the dealership. It takes 6+ months most of the time. So instead of doing that, you wait 6+ months and research the 200 series or LX570 market and then find the same. So it's kind of like a similar waiting time frame, right? The only other downside that I see for some people, and I think this is a silly downside, but I still want to bring it up, is the steering compared to the new ones. The new ones have an electronic rack. This has hydraulic. So this, you actually can feel what's happening on the road. I like that. But that means that the steering's going to kind of do the kickback thing where like you over a bump and it kicks back into the steering. Off-road, this is very pronounced. You're going over rough terrain and the steering's constantly working. Now, I found a couple workarounds with this. If I'm going slow enough over rough terrain, I just let the steering wheel feed through my hands. Like literally what I do, and this is just for demonstration purposes, is I just kind of hover my hands like this over the steering wheel and I just let it do the jiggle back and forth, and it actually works quite well. The car doesn't like veer all over the place. Again, if you're going at a slow speed, what happens is the steering ends up going all over the place, and then it actually gives you a better ride because you're not fighting the wheels back and forth. The new ones with the electronic rack, there's no kickback. But I mean, that's such a, in my opinion, it's like that's a silly reason to not get a car, is because the steering gives you a little bit of a kickback. But other than that, like the suspension with the 200 series is incredibly comfortable. The seats are comfortable. They're not perfect. I do prefer the seats in this generation of Tundra and Sequoia. The reason I'm saying is we own a Sequoia. The seats seem to be a little bit better. from that perspective with those cars in terms of comfort. But these are still comfortable enough. The driver's seat has lumbar support, and if you are really worried about seat comfort, get the LX version. The LX has more comfortable seats. And so when you look at things in totality, this has a V8 that gets marginally less fuel economy, but it has a bigger fuel tank, and there's tons of aftermarket support, so you can get a bigger, even bigger, you know, auxiliary fuel tank if you want, like what I did. It's like just over 2,000 bucks, not dirt cheap, but if you can buy a $70,000 plus 250 or an $80,000 plus Lexus GX or one of these, you can afford to buy a $2,000 fuel tank. But yeah, tons of that aftermarket support. And again, I have not had a single situation off-road where I have bottomed out with this vehicle. It articulates so well and the angles are so good that it just goes over everything. And I'm on completely stock suspension, and my tires are not huge. It's 285 by 65 by 18, so it's not even a true 33. It's an oversized 32. Whereas the 250 Land Cruiser, I used the heck out of the skid plates on that car. Constantly bottoming out. And the GX, same thing. I used the skid plates on the GX demos that I've had, smacked the front end a bunch on that car. Just not great angles on either of them. And obviously the LX570 is not going to have as good of angles. If you want the best angles, Land Cruiser. And then the LX570, it does have that active height control. As long as your car's not rusted out, and as long as you keep up with the maintenance schedule of the LX, that suspension system will not let you down. The problem is people don't do the necessary maintenance with the active height control, and then the system fails because it's not properly maintained. And that's the thing about Toyotas, is people seem to think that, like, oh, it's a Toyota, it's reliable. It's like, no. A Toyota is only reliable if you keep up with all the maintenancing. If you keep up with all the maintenancing, this thing will never let you down. But if you're skipping oil changes, you're skipping major service intervals, there's a major service interval every 30,000 miles with Toyotas, you're going to have problems. Or likely going to have problems. So that's all. That's my Land Cruiser 200 / Lexus LX570 manifesto. I think that both of them are just better vehicles for the money in the current market, and there's tons of low mileage examples still out there. And so, like, this is a time where you can get one that's basically brand new. And I honestly, like, I'm not trying to, like, kill Toyota with this whole series that I'm doing. My hope is that, again, Toyota fixes the problems with the GX and with the new 250. With the GX, they've fixed most of the stuff because they lifted it for the 25 model year, but it still has horrible angles because of the stock bumpers. You have to go aftermarket with that. And then the 250, I mean, small fuel tank, the engine's not adequate enough for that car. Like, it's fine for most driving, especially if you're going to do the street tires, but if you're going to put on real tires like what I have on this car and what I had on my 250, it just doesn't work. It needs more power, it needs more engine, it needs a front locker. Like, that's the biggest thing. They need to add a front locker to both of those vehicles, and then I'd say, okay, they're actually better than an LX570 and then a 200 series off-road. But until they do that, just not there. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you are now considering either a GX460 instead of a 5th gen 4Runner, and if you're not considering an LX570 or 200 series instead of the new stuff. I mean, not all of you are going to end up buying these, but I think that it's at least worth looking at before you go and buy the new stuff.